and the championship, Chapter 12, entitled The First Assignment. "Well," said Mr. Sparks at the start of the next lab, "what are you waiting for? Come up front and hand in your homework." A mountain of potato chip bags quickly formed on the top of his lab bench. Leon eyed the pile like a miner hunting for gold, but quickly concluded there was nothing worth prospecting. Mr. Sparks picked through the mound. "I see we've got some of the usual suspects. Oh, but here's one I haven't seen before." He tapped a bag. "Who brought these Wall Street blue chips?" "I did," said Antoinette Breed. "They're terribly gourmet and the only ones Nanny allows in the house." "And these salt-free, low-fat kale chips?" asked Mr. Sparks. "Those are mine," Flossie Parmigiano acknowledged unhappily. "They're super high in calcium, and they taste like burnt cardboard. My dad doesn't allow me to eat normal chips." "Low fat?" said Mr. Sparks. "They may not taste that good, Flossie, but they'll come in handy for a future experiment." He continued to excavate. "Now here's an interesting looking bag. Garden of Eden chips. Who brought these?" Leon raised his hand. "Where'd you get them?" Mr. Sparks asked. "My friend Maria gave me a membership to the Worldwide Chip of the Month Club. This bag was part of my August shipment. They're pretty tasty. Kind of a cross between a Wisdom and a Fandango." "In case you haven't noticed, Leon is crazy about chips," said Lily Matisse. "So I gather," said Mr. Sparks. "Well, it's always helpful to have an expert on hand." He dug deeper into the pile. "Whoa, who brought these?" "Guilty," PW said with a smirk. "My aunt sends them to us from Thailand." "Is that all one word?" Mr. Sparks asked, tapping the label. "Yup, it's the old-fashioned Thai word for Bangkok," PW explained. "The Guinness says it's the longest word in the world," he added proudly. "How do you pronounce it?" asked Flossie Parmigiano. "Just the way it's spelled," PW said with a straight face. Everyone laughed. PW grabbed the bag, took a deep breath, and read the name in its entirety. "Most impressive," said Mr. Sparks. "We usually just call them Bangkok chips," PW said. "Basil and pork is my favorite flavor, but my mom goes for these green tea ones." "Hey, is this language class or science?" Lumpkin complained. "Perhaps you have a point, Henry," said Mr. Sparks. "We should get started on today's assignment." The lesson began as soon as everyone was seated. "Does anyone know how many different species of living things there are in the world?" Mr. Sparks asked. Hands shot up. "Thomas, 1,000,000? Thomas Warchowski ventured. "Multiply that number by 100 and you'd be about right." 100 million? "Give or take," said Mr. Sparks. "Now, as you might imagine, it's easy enough to distinguish, say, a panther from a python, or a mushroom from a muskrat,